Yeah, I'm the vice chair of LDBC. I've been playing that role since about 2018, I think. And what that means is that I'm probably sort of largely responsible for the administration of LDBC. I also, independently of that, participate in, lead one of our working groups on graph schema. So my involvement with LDBC began when I was working as a product manager at Neo4j, and one of my main responsibilities was the work to create the project that's led to the GQL graph query language standard. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background and history of LDBC and what our activities are and where we sort of stand in terms of our membership and our financial position and so forth. So hence the title, The State of the Union. Let's see whether we can advance a slide. No. Up, down, down, higher. And we're joined, of course, by Peter Bonch, the chair of LDBC. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from him later on in various capacities. And he'll be able to add to this presentation. Let's see whether that's now working. It is. All right, so we're just getting started on this, so you haven't missed that much if you've just arrived. The background to LDBC is that it started as a EU project in 2013. Do you want to tell us about the EU project in 2013?
Sure. So this was led by Larry, Josep Larry-Bapey from University Politecnica de Catalunya, UPC, and me, and had a number of smaller companies. I think the ones that are still there are Ontotext and of course Neo4j. And this was a short project, only 3 years, with the intent of creating something, consensus and collaboration in the benchmarking space. Also with the intent of creating a legal entity that would outlast the project, and that happened. Yes, actually one of the early participants there was also as OpenLink. OpenLink made a RDF system called Virtuoso, and the architect of that was Ori Erling. I happen to know, as an anecdote, Alistair, that Ori is actually he is working in the infrastructure for Meta, Facebook, and he is here. He asked, you heard about the LDBC meeting. Maybe I'm now kind of getting ahead of myself with motions, but maybe he was interested maybe to attend today as an observer. Would that be? Well, we can add that to the motions that we will pass later. Yeah, but that was kind of the. Ori is also part of the older history of LDBC. But let's go back to the present. Here is Alistair.
Great. Well, thanks, Peter. So. I think it's fair to say that LDBC as a benchmarking standards organization is modeled on TPC, Transaction Processing Council. People will be very familiar with the benchmarks from TPC, and the sort of philosophy of TPC has been carried over into LDBC. A work that I think was originally led by Jim Gray came up with the idea of defined workloads and queries that would be constituted in written standards, that there would be a defined data model, the possibility of numerous scale factors, and a critical point that the metrics of performance that were produced from these standards would be reported with cost weighting, so that it would be possible to actually make comparisons between offerings from different vendors, irrespective of the size of the data sets and irrespective of the actual sort of implementation characteristics, because of the leveling effect of cost weighting. And also that it's the idea of these standards, these benchmarks, would be that they would be carried out through an audited process. So if one takes an LDBC benchmark standard and you want to actually publish results relating to that, you have to do that in conjunction with and under the supervision of an auditor that has been approved by LDBC. And that's how we sort of maintain the quality and fidelity and the completeness of benchmark testing and the results that that. And related to that point is that, like TPC, we have a fair use policy which says how you can report. Bring that closer if you're not getting the audio. Okay, sorry about that. Like TPC, the fair use policy states the way in which you actually report results and limits the use of the term LDBC benchmark result to the reporting of a completed audited test. So any other use of LDBC benchmark standards, and we're very happy to see those used for things like extraction of the data models and so forth, cannot be described as a benchmark result, but we'll come back to that. So the other thing that LDBC really represents is that it is a hub, a meeting point for people to discuss who are interested in the graph data world, whether they be vendors or researchers, consultants and individual practitioners and so forth. There's a paper that was published at TPC TC last year, which actually describes the history and the work of LDBC. So if you're interested in more detail than you're going to get in this talk, and you're probably going to hear a lot of detail about what people are actually up to in later talks, you can look at that as a background reference. That's available on the LDBC website, which has a publications section, and there's a lot of interesting papers and so forth that you can refer to there as well, less on the sort of description of the activities and more on the activities themselves and the technicalities. So the formal purpose of LDBC is to act as a not-for-profit consortium, bringing together members from industry and academia, and to concern itself with graph data workloads and technology. That does not mean that it's only restricted to graph databases or to one particular graph model. So we cover activities and thought about how graph data or graph workloads can be utilized, including in SQL systems or RDF systems and property graph systems, in addition. Our primary goal, as I've been emphasizing, is benchmark standards, but we have a secondary goal, which is the promotion of graph data technology in general and thinking about that. And that includes things like these TUC meetings, which we hold regularly in conjunction with the major database conferences of SIGMOD and VLDB, and also with the sort of home of the GQL and property graph query, SQL property graph query communities, in the sense of where people come together to try and support the initiation, the work that's done officially within WG3 and the actual implementation of these new standards for graph querying. And in that respect, we have a formal liaison with the WG3 Standards Committee, which defines SQL and GQL, and our members are able to gain access to the standards as they're being developed and to the working papers relating to that. We're also able to make contributions in the opposite direction, and some work in LDBC directly contributed, for example, to the final version of GQL. And lastly, we have, as I mentioned, the sort of publications page, and we sort of keep track of and try and promote publications relating both to our own activity and more generally to the graph world. The formal objects or goals of LDBC you can find in our constitutional document, the Articles of Association of LDBC, so I won't go over that again, just to draw your attention to its existence. That raises the point about what the organizational structure of LDBC is. We are what's called in English law a company limited by guarantee. That means we have no shareholders, we only have members, and we have no commercial intent or purpose. We don't seek to make a profit. We don't seek to accumulate assets. We're basically a meeting point for these various activities. So we have two classes of member, voting members and associate members, and we have a governing policy council, which is composed of representatives from the voting members, and a board of directors, which deals with the much smaller board of directors, which, as you might imagine, deals with the sort of everyday affairs of the company. And there's myself, Peter Shipping, and Ben Steer, who wasn't able to be here, are the 4 members of that board. In addition to our constitution, we have some bylaws which actually state exactly how we go about our activities, including the processes and rules about audited benchmarking, and, as I mentioned, the fair use policy. So just to look at a little bit more detail at what we look like from a membership perspective, voting members pay membership fees. That's where we get our money from. Well, we have one other source of income, which is auditing fees as well, which is a smaller proportion of the money that comes into LDBC. And then we have individual associate members who do not pay any fee, and voting members have a vote, and the individual associate members don't have a vote. But both members, in the sense of employees or agents of companies or research institutions that belong to LDBC, and individual members take part in all of our activities on a completely equal basis. And one of the things that LDBC has always sought to do is be open, easy to be involved with, and the work that we do should also be largely public, and there are only some constraints on that, like some of the relations we have with WG3, but in general we have an open source, open philosophy about the activities of LDBC, and we welcome new members, anybody who's got an interest in this area, to be part of our activities. The organizational members, I think now are at 23. You can see the logos of the various companies that are involved, and the split is probably something like 50-50 actually between companies from North America and Western Europe and companies from China. So it's very appropriate, I think, that we're able to have our first meeting here in Asia, you know, as we already heard. And we do have a couple of university members. Forth is a consortium, research consortium in Greece, and Birkbeck College is part of the University of London, and they're very active participants. And then we have this structure of a members' council or policy council and a board of directors. Those who are on the board of directors have to be members of the members' council. We have a couple of individual voting members, Peter and Gabor Sharnash, who have both been very active and key participants in the history of LDBC. So we organize our work through what we call task forces or working groups. It's kind of an accident that we have 2 names. We use the name task force for work on benchmarks, the actual standards that LDBC produces, and we use working group for work, for example, in the GQL community. So at the moment, we have, there's a mistake here. I've managed to not eliminate various things. What I should be saying here is there are benchmark task forces, and there are working groups relating to the GQL community. From the benchmark side of things, we have one task force that concentrates on the historical benchmarks that are listed here, Graphalytics, Semantic Publishing Benchmark, Social Network Benchmark, SMB, and there are interactive and business intelligence variants of the last one. We also have a newer benchmark, financial benchmark, or FinBench as it's usually called. When did we start work on that? Was it 2022 or 2023? 2022. So we'll be hearing talks on both of these, so I don't want to go into any more detail, just to draw your attention to them. Just to comment on our benchmarking activities, benchmarking has been thought of in this TPC-like fashion, which is about performance and is very much about databases. There is obviously an interesting question about benchmarking in the sort of current AI era and what that actually means and what role LDBC might have. As far as that's concerned, that's something that's been raised in recent discussions in the last Policy Council meeting that we had, and that's something that we're interested in hearing people's opinion about. We have on the GQL community side 2 working groups, one which I chair relating to extended GQL schema, or LEX is the sort of acronym for that. And there's a GQL implementation working group, which is carrying out work on various language engineering tools, and we'll again be hearing specific talks on those 2 activities as we go through. One other thing or a couple of other things to mention, and these relate to sort of initiatives from, as it happens, two of our members, AWS and Neo4j. In one case jointly, in the other it's focused on AWS. There are things going on and things that people are thinking about that LDBC can potentially play a role in, and we're very open to hosting discussion around initiatives that come from our members. This is driven by the members and what they're interested in doing. AWS's OneGraph initiative, which is looking at how to integrate LPG and RDF, is an example of that. Another is the joint initiative by AWS and Neo4j to carry out a transition from OpenCipher to the GQL language and what that would actually look like. And we've had discussions relating to that last topic in our policy council and trying to work out what the relationship is between GQL implementation work within LDBC and what's going on in the OpenCipher project. So that's sort of part of being a hub, a meeting point for activities that affect the whole of the graph data community. Our financial position, as I mentioned, we get money from membership fees and audit fees, and we spend it on administrative things like accountancy and legal, software services. We spend some money on contract staff to carry out certain activities. We have no full-time employees. In fact, we have no employees in a legal sense. We have expenditure on infrastructure for benchmarking, for storing data sets, for example, because we carry out work to generate very large-scale data sets so that that doesn't have to be repeated. And we have events and travel, particularly the TUC meetings. This is actually the second TUC meeting this year. There was a meeting in Santiago de Chile at the concurrent with SIGMOD in June as well. I'll talk in a moment about not just our income and our expenditure, but where we sit in terms of our balance sheet. You will not want to read all of that in detail, so I provided a summary. This is our financial position, stated in pounds sterling, in thousands of pounds. As of the 31st of July, on the left-hand side, you can see that we started the year with £30,000 in reserves, and we're currently sitting on an accounting position which is much larger than that. We've got things to spend money on before the end of this year, and what we're predicting will happen by the end of this year is that we will have effectively stayed flat in terms of our background reserves of £30,000, and we will have spent the entire £75,000, which is roughly what we get from membership fees. So that gives you a sense of what the sort of scale of LDBC is as an organization. We're extremely solidly founded. We've not had any kinds of problems in terms of money, and that's very much due to the extremely professional activity of our company secretary treasurer, Judy Bingham, who looks after our financial affairs with good effect. So that's the kind of summary. I've got one more slide after we've taken any questions or comments, but that's an attempt to give you an idea about LDBC and what we're up to. So are there any questions or anything else that people would like to ask about? If not, then just to mention that there is going to be we're taking the opportunity of the fact that Peter and myself are here and that we've got this meeting taking place in Asia, in China. So we're planning to have a meeting of the voting members of LDBC. I think it's going to be after all of the technical sessions, before we actually have dinner. It's an opportunity to talk in person. It's not a formal meeting or a decisive meeting as such. Obviously, it's open to representatives of member companies, as many as the member companies would like to bring. I think in general, it's about, are there any ideas or concerns or proposals about what LDBC should do, maybe it should do differently. And one thing that I'm interested in is making sure that we do our best to not be just a European or a North American-centered organization, and that we are sensitive to and responsive to the needs of our members and the community in this region of Asia. And if there are any ideas or points that you have relating to that, they'd be very welcome at that meeting later on. So I'm sure Shipeng will give us the details on that as we proceed. So that's what I have. Thank you very much for your attention, and the rest of the meeting should be more interesting. It's not about bureaucracy. Okay, thank you.